Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a Senior Consultation Specialist with Atkins Realis. Today, we are continuing our series of live stream topics on the Northern Road Link project as it moves through the provincial environmental assessment and federal impact assessment processes. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities, so we hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. With me today is my usual co-host, Jennifer Ashawasagai Pereira, my colleague and an Indigenous engagement and traditional knowledge specialist at Atkins Realis. Jennifer is a member of Henvey Inlet First Nation, located on the French River south of Sudbury, and works with me on our projects across Canada. Good afternoon, Jen. How are you today?
Mino Gage Gut, Nishin. Good day, I'm good.
Good day. Well, good day to
Mino
you.
Gage Gut.
Uh, it's uh, it's uh, it's Tuesday, so that's all we can say. So, why don't we get started? Today, we're going to talk about
All
the
right.
migratory bird studies that we are undertaking as part of the environmental and impact assessments. So, as we normally do, we do a little review of what we're going to cover today, and we're going to start off by providing the usual project background, and then we're going to follow up with the objectives of the migratory bird studies, talk about what will be assessed, the types of birds that will be assessed, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to describe existing conditions, um, how the assessments will be done in terms of the types of surveys, and then how you can get in contact with us. So, as we normally do, we provide a bit of a background on the project. And just to remind everyone or introduce our new viewers and listeners, this is a proposed all season road in Northern Ontario that is planned to sit on Treaty 9 land. It would connect the Ring of Fire mineral deposits to the all season highway network via the proposed Martin Falls Community Access Road. And it would also provide an opportunity for Webequie First Nation to connect to the all-season network via the Webequie Supply Road. And we'll explain this all in a minute. Um, this project is subject to the Environmental Assessment Act and the Impact Assessment Act. Um, it is unique in the sense that two First Nations are its proponents, those First Nations being Martin Falls and Webequie. Both of these communities are about 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. Um, and of course, they are remote and not currently accessible by all season roads. So uh, the winter roads are open for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks typically. That window has been getting narrower over the years, so the need for an all-season road has increased pretty substantially. There have been a number of studies done on the road or on a transportation corridor to the Ring of Fire. Finally, in 2020, Ontario, Martin Falls First Nation, and Webequie First Nation agreed to work together and conduct a provincial environmental assessment and ultimately a federal impact assessment as well. There are, as you may know or may not know, there are 3 all-season road projects currently in different stages of environmental assessment or impact assessment. The first and the northernmost one is the Webequie Supply Road, which is planned to run from the airport in Webequie southeast to the McFalds Lake area east of the Muckatai River. Then there is the Northern Road Link project, which sits in the middle between the Webequie Supply Road and Martin Falls Community Access Road. So the Northern Road Link project would extend from the Ring of Fire south to connect with the Webequie or with the Martin Falls Community Access Road, which runs further south and to ultimately connect to the provincial highway network. And the purpose of the Northern Road Link well, there's multiple purposes, but it would enable economic activity by allowing the transport of goods, services, and resources to and from the Ring of Fire area. And as with most all-season road projects, it's more than just a road. The road itself would be an all-season multi-use gravel road, ranging in length between 117 and 164 kilometers. The reason why I provide a range, not an actual length, is that we're in the process of finalizing to identify the preferred corridor. So once that is done, we will have a fixed length for the road. The right of way is planned to be 100 meters. There will be numerous water crossings, as you can imagine, with one very large crossing at the Attawapiskat River. In terms of ancillary infrastructure, this is additional infrastructure beyond the road, and this would be both temporary and permanent. There would be temporary storage and laydown areas for materials and equipment, maintenance and maintenance facilities and yards, which would be permanent. There would be access roads to either temporary or permanent pits and quarries to extract material to use, such as gravel and different other sizes of rock to use for construction of the road. And then there would be construction camps and along the road for housing the construction workers, and they have their own infrastructure associated with them as well. In terms of the alternative corridors, as I mentioned, we don't have yet a fixed length for the road because we are finalizing and identifying the preferred corridor. There's different options now for different road segments, and ultimately these one will be chosen from the different options, and these will then be connected together to form the preferred corridor. So, Jen, with that, we now get to the
All right.
heart of today's presentation. And we're going to talk about the migratory bird studies, which are pretty interesting. And everyone
Hmm.
likes migratory birds, don't they?
Yeah, they should all be back by now. Everybody's back in the neighborhood, I think.
Everybody, yeah, I think you're right. Everybody should be back by now, unless they've been
And I
delayed by
also,
weather.
and speaking of migratory birds, I think it's also goose break for some
Yes, it is,
right
isn't
about
it?
now.
That's right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's yeah, for some communities it's goose break. That's right. Some have it a little bit earlier than this. Some have it maybe a little bit later, but yeah, this is typically it.
Around
So
the time.
it's around the time, that's right, and it varies, of course, given their conditions and winds and things like that, right? But it's typically around now. So let's look at some of the study objectives. So the first is to sort of characterize those nesting bird communities, understand density and abundance um, of these migratory birds within the project footprint, the local study area, and the larger regional study area. Um,
Hmm.
we look at the impacts of the project on migratory birds and the impacts of migratory birds on the project. Um, and then of course, as with other uh, studies that are done, recommendations are provided for minimizing the negative effects, whether they be are in health, environmental, or health, or social, or economic effects related to those migratory bird impacts as well. So that sort of
Hmm.
captures all the objectives of the studies. Now, in terms of types of birds, it's a wide range.
That's
Isn't it,
right.
Jen? When
A
forest
lot.
birds, yeah, like you're looking at forest birds, which are migratory birds that feed the northern boreal forest during the spring and summer. So these would be, pretty well-known birds: warblers, sparrows, thrushes, flycatchers, and kinglets.
Oh, one
And
of
of
my
course,
favorites. I don't know if they're there all year or if they're a migratory bird, are those whiskey jacks, the
oh, the whiskey
blackbirds.
jacks, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, those are fun, aren't they? I don't know if they're there all year. We'd have to ask one of our bird specialists on that, but
Hmm.
Um, they probably are around all year. But then raptors, we've got the raptors, not the basketball team, but the actual
Little
carnivorous birds of
dinosaurs.
prey. Yes, yeah, that's
I don't
right.
know about
So this
little, because some of them are pretty big, Don.
they are they're very big, Jen. And they include like hawks and eagles and owls and vultures. Yeah, these are big birds typically. Well, you got to be big when you're a bird of prey, I think, right? That's kind of part of the requirement. So
Oh,
then we
and
have the
osprey,
shorebirds.
and then, yep.
Yes, osprey too. That's right. And then you have got shorebirds that live and feed and nest along the shoreline of water bodies. So examples of some of these shorebirds would be, and this is one of my favorite names, yellowlegs, sandpipers, plovers, snipes, and allies. Um, then we've got waterfowl, and so these are birds that frequent the water bodies. We see them all the time: ducks, geese, swans, and then we have crepuscular birds. And I love the word crepuscular, Jen. It's a great
Crepuscular.
word.
Crepuscular.
Yes. Isn't it great? Isn't it a great word? So these are the birds. These are the birds that are really active before sunrise and before sunset. So in that sort of what we call twilight, the twilight hours, right, where you got
Hmm.
different light levels. So night hawks are considered to be crepuscular birds. But there's a word for you to impress people at
Crepuscular. That's it.
family gatherings, crepuscular, that's a good one to use. And then wetland birds. So these wetland birds live and feed and nest in bogs, fens, and swamps. So typically in the James Bay lowland areas, they're habitat for many birds, and then as including marsh species such as rails and bitterns. So lots of different types of birds, some very different from others, are being studied. And then in terms of what will be assessed in terms of existing conditions, we're going to be looking at a bunch of different things like habitat availability. So measurements of quantity and quality of habitat. We're going to be
Hmm.
looking at well, habitat quantity, like I mentioned before, the amount of habitat available for birds in their various life history stages. So there's different habitats sometimes for different life stages for the birds, and then there's habitat quality. So that's the how suited the habitat is for each species. Because some species have very specific habitat requirements, and again, life history stages play into this as well. We look
Hmm.
at abundance and distribution. This refers to the total number of a population, or how common a certain species is. And then another sort of interesting thing that we use to describe existing conditions for bird species are species richness. So this would be direct changes to the number and proportion of species within each study area. So, has there been an impact to, like, has the proportion of a particular species changed from 30% to 20%, or would it change with the introduction of the project, looking at things like that. So species richness is another key measure. As we roll along talking about the existing conditions, there's other things that we look at, like relative overlap. So this would be like, um, y-
Oh,
our
there's a lot
species
of
in.
this.
There is a lot of this, right?
Hmm.
Is a species, does it have multiple habitats, or is it just one very specific habitat? So this is another one. Species habitat specificity. So this looks at changes to specific habitat types availability, because again, certain species have very specific habitat requirements. So, um,
Hmm.
our team, when they do this work, are looking. They come up with very detailed descriptions of the habitat. There's different classifications of habitat. Some of these could include like specialized upland land cover type, specialized wetland land cover type, riparian, specialized riparian habitats, things like that. So that's an important thing that we look at. There's predation and habitat usage. So this looks at possible changes to access by predators and use of a specific habitat by new species that could result in changes in populations due to increased hunting, increased predator, whether it's raptors or mammals, predation, and then introduction of new species, competition. So that's an interesting one. And then cultural significance of importance. So this looks at changes to to cultural interaction. So the interaction of 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 humans with and the usage of the resources within the study area resulting from the project, is to look at if the project could potentially impact
Yeah,
some
like
of
if there
these
will be,
cultural
we
activities.
were we were talking about the goose hunt or spring goose hunt, which is
Yes,
around right now, and if the project might impact spring goose hunt.
great. That's a great example, Jen, and it's that's a big one, right? Because it's important to community members, the spring goose hunt, so they can load up their freezers, right,
Hmm.
with these migratory birds. And so, yeah, we look closely at any potential impacts to those kinds of activities. Let's move now to talk about the types of surveys, because there's a number of different activities involved in the migratory bird surveys. One of them is the breeding bird point count surveys. And I have to say that this work is very specialized. The people that do this work usually are pretty passionate about birds, to put it mildly, and and they have special skills at being able, mainly listening skills, right? Being able to listen to particular calls and identify a species. Um, so in these bird count surveys, breeding bird count surveys, um, so you have a surveyor and they conduct a stationary count. So they're in a position and they count all the birds seen and heard within a certain time period. So they'll use like a 10-minute point count recording each species that they hear, that they or see and encounter in 1-minute intervals. Um, and then they provide an estimate as to how close or how far away that species that was detected potentially was. So 0 to 50 meters, 50 to 100 meters, and greater than 100 meters. Um, they also pay attention to the land cover, right? To
Hmm.
understand the habitat within 100 meters. So there's a lot of this is really skilled work, and
And it
there's a
takes
lot of
time
it takes
because
time. It does take
everyone
time.
who's been in the bush or out in the land knows that once you start walking through, everybody goes quiet except for
Yes,
blue
yeah,
jays.
that's
They start
yeah,
yelling, "Intruder alert! Intruder
yeah,
alert!" And
true.
then once you sit once you sit still long
They are
enough, then
noisy, aren't they?
you know they are, and then the birds will start singing again after a little bit of time, right? When they get used
Yeah,
to your presence. So, and then you were talking, or you mentioned highly specialized skills, and we have passionate staff. And one of our colleagues, not only is she so passionate to do this work that on her time off, she goes and does this on her time off.
yeah, yeah.
She
No, it's
did,
pretty
she did
incredible.
a canoe trip to go and check that out. What was she out there for? Almost 2 weeks, just her
Yeah,
and some
the
other.
Moosonee area
Yes, and so that was pretty
on
cool.
the on the Moose River. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Hmm.
And oh yeah, it's a passionate group of people that do this kind of work. They compile lists, right? And when they see a species that they've never seen before, that's a big deal, right? They add that to their personal list of species seen, so it's pretty exciting for them. We also do acoustic bird sampling, and these are interesting because this is where we have these listening units, these acoustic recording units um, that we deploy in the forest, and they basically record either all day or at particular times of the day. And
Mhm.
so what these do is these record the sounds, and then that data. So they place these at least 500 meters apart in different locations, and the idea is to collect data on species present and then characterize that, like describe the habitat where these things were installed. And then they take all the data that they collect on the different species that have been listened to through these acoustic recording units, and then they do modeling, right? So they predict over a larger area the distribution of the different species based on the information collected through the acoustic recording units. And then we do crepuscular bird surveys. Again, there's that word
Yes.
again, coming back to haunt us. So these are done, they're usually targeting like a single species, like a crepuscular species. So it would be the nighthawk or maybe other species. And again, this is done during the twilight hours. So between just before sunrise and just before sunset. And it allows biologists to get a really good understanding of these interesting species, have very specific um, habits with being active mainly just during those crepuscular times of day. Okay, do you like that one? Crepuscular times of day. I
Yes.
had to squeeze that in, Jen. Yeah, I love the word. I want to use it to make people think I'm smart, stuff like that. I'm gonna use that wherever I can.
I think we're gonna need
And
a
then
bigger list of crepuscular birds.
Okay, we can. I'll put that together because I like the word, so I'll follow up on that one, guaranteed. And some of the other surveys done, or something, are others that are maybe a little bit more familiar to people. The waterfowl migration surveys. So we would fly the length of the proposed route, and then look over and then fly over like any lake or open wetland. So open stretches or bodies of water within a kilometer of the route, and then we record, basically
Mhm.
we try to do estimated counts as part of that. Then we have the shorebird migration aerial surveys. Again, we have a primary observer and a secondary observer who records a lot of the information. um, so you record everything, basically: shorebirds, waterfowl, raptors, any other observations. So there's a lot going on in those surveys. So you're flying around in the plane, but boy, you've got a lot of work to do. And then so they'll collect date, time, location, the weather, what species were seen, and how many of each species were seen as well too. And then finally, we've got the raptor nesting data collection. So
Mhm.
a lot of this work is done, Jen, during the winter caribou surveys, where we do the transects that are perpendicular to the road, so at 90-degree angles to the
Right.
road, where we fly long distances.
So, 2
Um,
birds.
out of reg- yeah, yeah, exactly. And then, so we look for these stick nests, right? The big stick nests,
Mhm.
and these stick nests are those are the types of nests that raptors typically build. Um, and so these are usually close to rivers and lake shorelines, so that they can be used as base camp for hunting fish. And then you often see them in unburned, like deciduous or conifer stands. Um, so this is important information, but the easiest way to collect this information is when the leaves are down in the winter, and because it's much easier to spot a stick nest with when there's no leaves in the trees than when
That's
the
right.
when the leaves are in the trees. That's for sure. So, wow, lots going on in these migratory bird studies, Jen. Yeah, and so that wraps up today's discussion of migratory bird studies. We hope this was helpful, and we hope it encourages you to So join us again next week when we're going to talk about the socioeconomic studies. Don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, northernroadlink.ca, Miigwech, and make sure to look out for our project updates on social media and our website.
Aha, Bamapi.